Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
There's a strange moment that happens when your brain can't quite catch up with what your eyes are seeing, like when you think you see your dog sitting on the porch but realize it's just a shadow, or when you walk into your childhood home and everything feels a little wrong. That's exactly how I felt the second I opened the envelope Diane handed me at our 25th wedding anniversary party, like my world had shifted 5 inches to the left and no one bothered to tell me. The room was full of the usual suspects, our two grown kids Maddie and Liam, her sister Karen who never really liked me, Rick and Laura from down the street, and a dozen or so others I'd known for years, but never truly trusted. There were banners hanging from the ceiling, gold and white balloons everywhere, even one of those custom cakes with our wedding photo printed in edible ink, which honestly looked more disturbing than nostalgic. The playlist was full of songs Diane had picked: Fleetwood Mac, The Eagles, Bonnie Raitt, all tracks that had meaning for her but not necessarily for us. Everyone was smiling, raising glasses of Prosecco, calling out our names like we were royalty stepping off a plane, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe that it was real. That we were celebrating 2.5 decades of loyalty, of inside jokes, of hard-fought forgiveness and quiet mornings. And then Diane, in her perfectly pressed white dress and that fake little smirk she'd worn too often lately, leaned in close and handed me a small white envelope instead of a toast. I thought it was a card. Maybe a sweet note. Maybe something private and sentimental, a letter to remind me of the journey we'd been on together. But I should have known better, because when I opened it and saw the header from Wallace and Graves Law Offices, I knew instantly it wasn't anything like that. It was official. It was cold. It was a divorce packet signed, notarized, dated 2 months ago. 2 months. While I was planning a weekend getaway to the Blue Ridge Mountains and trying to book her favorite wine tasting tour, she was sitting in a stuffy lawyer's office, probably wearing those same pearl earrings, asking about asset division and custody agreements. I stood there in the middle of the room, the envelope open, the papers half sliding out, and I swear it got so quiet I could hear the carbonation fizzing in someone's champagne flute. I looked up and Diane was staring right at me, not blinking. Then she stepped a little closer, tilted her head just enough to brush her lips near my ear, and whispered, "We were all tired of you." Not I was tired of you. Not I think we need space. She said we. As in a collective. As in a damn alliance. I scanned the room again, and suddenly everything looked different. Liam's forced smile, Maddie looking down at her phone, Karen biting her lip like she was trying not to laugh. Even Rick, who used to be my Friday night poker buddy, was sipping his beer like he'd seen this movie before and was just waiting for the credits. I didn't say a word. I folded the papers neatly, slid them back into the envelope, and nodded. Just one slow, deliberate nod. I thanked everyone for coming, without raising my voice, without sarcasm, just enough volume for them to hear. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Then I walked out of the rented banquet hall, past the valet who was too shocked to offer me my coat, down the street to where my car was parked 2 blocks away. No one followed. No one said anything. I sat in my truck with the engine off for almost 20 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry yet. Mostly I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out all the soft parts of me and left a shell just sturdy enough to drive. I thought about going home, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. So I drove to the edge of town and checked into the cheapest motel I could find, the kind where the sheets smell like bleach and the vending machines are half broken, and I laid down fully dressed, staring at the cracked ceiling tiles, until the sun came up. The next morning, my phone was face down on the motel nightstand, buzzing like a wasp trapped in a glass. I flipped it over and saw it, 43 unread messages from Diane. All from sometime after midnight. All while I was lying there like a ghost in room 17 of a 2-star motel. I didn't open any of them. Not yet. I didn't check any of Diane's messages that morning. I didn't call Maddie or Liam. I didn't even order breakfast. I just sat in that stiff motel chair next to the heater that clicked every 15 minutes like a metronome counting down my patience, drinking coffee that tasted like cardboard and watching the dust float through the slice of light cutting across the floor. For 3 days, I stayed in that motel room, only leaving to walk down the block to a gas station for jerky and granola bars. I didn't want food. I didn't want answers. I wanted the silence. The kind of silence that stretches and creaks and starts to show you things you hadn't let yourself feel in years. Somewhere around the second night, lying in a bed that wasn't mine, with my belt still on and the TV turned low to a channel playing reruns of Walker, Texas Ranger, it started hitting me. Not all at once like a movie scene with dramatic music, but more like a slow leak in a ceiling after a storm. Little drips of memory. Little flashes of things I'd ignored. Like how we stopped sharing a bed about 4 years ago, Diane said my snoring kept her up, and I believed her. Or maybe I just let myself believe her because it was easier than asking why she stopped reaching for me. Then there were the vacations. 2 years back, she started planning solo trips, her and the girls, she said. Spa weekends in Sedona, wine tastings in Sonoma, always perfectly timed around my busiest work stretches. I didn't ask many questions. I figured she needed the space. Hell, I thought giving her space was the loving thing to do. But there was one memory I couldn't shake, and once it surfaced, I couldn't put it back in the box. It was about 2 years ago, and I was doing laundry, which I rarely did because Diane always insisted on doing it herself. That day, she was out, and I wanted to help for once. I was digging through her coat pocket for tissues before tossing it in, and I found a folded hotel receipt. Not just any hotel. It was a fancy one in Scottsdale, Arizona. A suite. 5 nights. Room service, spa charges, wine bar bill. But here's the thing, I'd never been to Scottsdale in my life, let alone with her. When I asked her about it later, she laughed it off. Said it was part of her girls' weekend, and one of the girls couldn't put it on her card, so Diane covered and got paid back in cash. And I believed her. Or I made myself believe her. Either way, I let it go. Like an idiot. And now I sit here thinking, 5 nights, that's over a week. Wait, no, it's not. It's 5 nights. But my brain was spinning, and everything I thought I knew was starting to unravel like a cheap sweater caught on a nail. Every little detail I'd brushed off was suddenly front and center. The late-night texts she'd laugh off, the locked phone, the way she'd go quiet when Rick came over for poker and then find reasons to linger near him in the kitchen. And Rick, yeah, Rick, my so-called friend. There were little clues there too. The way he got weirdly defensive whenever I made harmless jokes about Diane. The way he once called her D like it was a nickname they had privately. It all felt like watching a magic trick in reverse, the illusion falling apart right in front of your eyes. On the 3rd day, I finally decided to go back to the house. Not because I wanted to see her or talk. I just wanted clean clothes and maybe to grab my dog, Charlie. He's a golden retriever we rescued 12 years ago when the kids were still in school and Diane still looked at me like I was someone she admired. He was always more mine than hers, followed me around the house, slept at the foot of my bed even after she moved to the guest room. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was gone, and I felt a flicker of relief. I needed it to be empty. But when I got to the front door, my key didn't fit. She'd already changed the locks. No note. No warning. Just locked out. I rang the bell. Waited. Rang again. Nothing. I walked around the back where the fence was still a little loose and peeked through the patio door. The couch had different throw pillows. The photo of our family that used to hang in the entryway was gone. And there was no sign of Charlie. His leash wasn't by the door. His bed wasn't in the corner. She took my damn dog. I didn't bang on the door. I didn't call her. I didn't scream or throw anything or sit down on the porch like a rejected high school boyfriend. I just stood there, staring through the glass, letting the emptiness settle into me like fog. And then, for reasons I still don't understand, I smiled. Not a big grin or some twisted Joker laugh, but a small, knowing smile. The kind of smile that only comes when something inside you snaps, not in a way that breaks you, but in a way that builds a new version of you from the ashes of the old. I walked back to my truck, sat down, and turned on the engine. The dashboard clock said 10:47 in the morning. I picked up my phone, finally scrolled through those 43 unread messages from Diane. Most of them were some variation of "Can we talk?" or "Please just let me explain." One said, "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," which made me pause. But I didn't reply to any of them. Not then. I just typed one word. Sent it. Lunch. We met at a place she used to love, one of those bistro-style restaurants with overpriced salads and rustic wood tabletops that look charming until you realize they're just sanded-down pallets. It was a Tuesday afternoon, almost exactly a week since the night she handed me an envelope instead of a toast. I picked the time and location deliberately public, bright, unassuming, because I wanted her to know I wasn't coming there to beg or cry or scream. I just wanted to sit across from her like two business associates going over a contract that had reached its expiration date. When I walked in, she was already sitting at a corner table, nervously folding and unfolding her napkin. She wore that beige sweater I got her for her birthday last year, the one she pretended to love but never wore until now, probably thinking it might earn her some kind of sympathy. Her makeup was heavier than usual, like she was trying to conceal the last few nights of not sleeping, and she didn't meet my eyes at first. I sat down without saying anything, pulled the menu toward me like we were just grabbing lunch to catch up on the week. I didn't ask how she was. I didn't ask about Charlie or the locks or what she'd told the kids. I just said, "Let's get this over with," and watched her flinch like I'd slapped her. She ordered a chicken Caesar salad without dressing, like always, and I got the same thing with extra croutons, because it felt appropriate somehow to eat something dry and tasteless while swallowing the bitter soup of old memories. The waitress sensed the tension immediately and left without small talk. Diane leaned in like she wanted to reach across the table, but I kept my arms folded, my face blank, my breathing slow. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," she said, her voice cracking a little around the edges, like she'd practiced saying it in the mirror but wasn't ready for how it would sound out loud. I didn't respond, just stared at her like a man watching a movie he already knew the ending to. She shifted in her seat and looked around the restaurant before continuing, her voice low but urgent. "I was going to talk to you in private," she said. "I didn't want it to be at the party, but people talked me into it. They said it would be easier to just do it publicly, clean break." She looked down at her lap when she said "they," like the names were too heavy to say out loud, or maybe she thought protecting them would somehow protect her too. "You mean Laura," I said flatly, and her eyes flicked up to meet mine. "And Rick," I added, watching the color drain from her face like someone had flipped a switch behind her eyes. She tried to speak, but I cut her off. "I know everything, Diane. I know how Laura told you I was boring and tired and not the man I used to be. I know Rick found you that lawyer. Hell, I even know they planned to be there when you handed me the papers, just to make sure you went through with it. You had a support team for your ambush. Cute." She blinked fast, like she was trying to clear away fog or maybe guilt, or maybe just the realization that the man across from her wasn't the fool she'd imagined him to be. "You were so quiet all the time," she said, her voice now softer, less defensive. "You weren't the same. You stopped being fun. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. I wanted to feel alive again." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I wanted her to keep going. I wanted to hear the whole damn thing, to see if she'd finally say it out loud. "I chose someone else over you." I bet on them and lost. But she didn't. She just kept circling the drain with pretty phrases and sad eyes, hoping I'd give her a branch to grab onto. "You know," I said, tilting my head like I was genuinely curious, "how's Rick's affair with your niece going?" The words hung in the air between us like smoke, and for a second, I thought she might laugh, like I was joking, like it was too absurd to be true. But then she saw my face flat, unreadable, not playing around, and her lips parted slightly as the color left her cheeks. What?" she whispered. "Months ago," I said, sipping my water like it was whiskey, "I saw them together outside that bar on 5th Street. Her 23-year-old ass wrapped around him like a damn scarf. I followed them for fun. Got some great photos." Screenshots too. The texts were a little gross, but entertaining. She calls him Uncle Slick, by the way. Thought you'd like to know. Diane sat back in her chair like I'd knocked the wind out of her. She blinked once. Twice. Looked out the window like there might be an escape route she hadn't noticed before. But there wasn't. Just me, the salad neither of us had touched, and a pile of truth she wasn't ready for. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, the kind you get for free at tech expos or company trainings, and slid it across the table toward her. "Here's your anniversary gift," I said, my voice calm, almost friendly. "Check it before bed." She didn't pick it up right away. She just stared at it like it might explode in her hand, and for the first time since this whole mess started, she didn't have a single word left to say. The truth is, I didn't stumble into any of this by accident, and I wasn't blindsided in the way everyone expected me to be. I've always been quiet, yes. I've always been the guy in the room who listens more than he talks, the one who nods instead of shouting, the one who remembers the little things other people miss. It's why I've always been underestimated, why Diane probably thought she could do what she did, and I'd just roll over and vanish like some polite ghost who wouldn't dare cause a scene. But what no one tells you is that when quiet people finally get loud, it usually means they've been planning that moment for a very long time. It started about a year ago, give or take a few weeks, though the cracks in our marriage had been spreading long before that. I just didn't want to see them. Or maybe I did, but it was easier to keep pretending we were still partners in something that mattered. We had this rhythm, you know? She'd come home late, say she stayed for a drink with coworkers, and I'd nod, heat up leftovers, ask how the meeting went. That sort of marital autopilot that looks functional from the outside, but is basically just two people orbiting around the idea of a relationship. But one night, she slipped up. It was small, almost stupid. She came home smelling like someone else's cologne. Not perfume, not even subtle about it. I remember she hugged me when she walked in the door, which was rare, and I smelled it immediately. Something spicy, woody, expensive. Definitely not mine. I didn't say a thing, not then, just smiled and asked if she wanted dinner. She said she already ate, and I just kept smiling. That night, I emailed an old friend of mine from college, Alan, who now worked as a private investigator out of Tacoma and owed me a favor from way back when we were both broke and stupid and one of us bailed the other out of a bar fight. I told Alan everything, asked him to be discreet, and within a week he had a folder started with times, dates, license plates, photos, and names. Diane wasn't just cheating. She was treating our marriage like a layover. Short stays, quick getaways, someone always waiting at the next gate. There was a man named Dean Older, married, some marketing guy she met through her office. Then a couple months later, Rick's name started popping up, and that one burned more than I expected it to. Rick, who'd eaten at our table, who toasted at our daughter's graduation, who once drove me to the ER when I broke my wrist working on the garage. That bastard. And then there was Laura, whispering poison into Diane's ear, encouraging the reset, telling her she deserved more, deserved better, deserved a new story. But the affair was only half the rot. Alan found something else buried in bank statements, little withdrawals that didn't look like much on their own, 300 here, 500 there, all marked for vague expenses like household or miscellaneous. She'd been quietly funneling money out of our joint account into a separate one. Over 9 months, she moved more than $12,000. When I confronted her in my head, I'd play it out while driving to work. I pictured yelling, demanding answers, maybe even threatening legal hell. But in real life, I didn't do any of that. I waited. I let her build her exit plan. I watched her build a castle with a hollow foundation. 6 months ago, while she was on another girls' weekend, I moved $60,000, my money, pre-marriage inheritance, clearly documented and protected, into a crypto wallet she didn't know existed. I didn't touch a cent of it. I just wanted it out of her reach. Around the same time, I arranged a meeting with the managing partner at the law firm she was using for the divorce. His name is Grant, and he just happens to be my cousin on my mom's side. We weren't close, Not until recently, but family is family, and he didn't like being lied to when I showed him what Diane and Rick had been up to. So when she plugged that flash drive into her laptop, maybe alone in her bedroom or maybe still in her car outside that restaurant, she would have seen everything laid out in perfect order: surveillance photos, call logs, screenshots of her texts with Rick, GPS data, even copies of the wire transfers she thought she'd hidden so well. But the cherry on top was a letter from Grant himself, outlining the serious ethical concerns about the way her attorney handled our divorce documents, especially the part where she filed them while still actively siphoning from our shared funds without disclosure. Later that night, I sent her one more message, short and to the point. Hope the new place is nice. You'll need it. I didn't hear back. Not right away. I imagined she was too busy picking up the pieces of whatever fantasy life she thought she was building, watching it collapse in slow motion with every click on that drive. The next morning, I heard from a friend of mine who works in the same building as Diane. He told me she walked into her office and the air went dead still. People didn't say good morning. They didn't nod. They just stared. And then she opened her laptop and saw that every major email thread between her and Rick, and between her and Laura, had been leaked to the internal office system. Not by me directly, of course, but things have a way of spreading when truth tastes like scandal and people are tired of pretending they don't notice the rot in the walls. I don't know what she did next. I don't really care. Because the thing about trust is, once it breaks, it never shatters quietly. It screams as it falls, echoes in every hallway, and people look, whether they want to or not. The fallout came quicker than I expected, and in some ways, quieter too. No screaming voicemails, no last-ditch declarations of love in the rain, no half-crazed knocks on my window at midnight. Instead, the universe did what it does best when you finally stop trying to control the chaos. It handled it for me. By the end of the week, Diane was suspended from her firm, indefinitely and without pay, pending a full ethics investigation. Apparently, the leaked emails weren't just embarrassing. They were evidence of something much uglier: communications with clients that violated confidentiality, shady internal conversations about pushing certain cases for bonuses, and hours of personal messages on company time, some of which included attachments that should have never touched a work server. Her name was quickly scrubbed from the partner trackboard, and just like that, the empire she built with smug precision began to buckle from the inside. I didn't gloat. Not publicly. I didn't post about it, didn't tell mutual friends, didn't send any "I told you so" texts. I just watched from a safe distance while the narrative started to shift. The same friends who stood behind her at that party, Laura and Karen, and that smug bastard Rick, suddenly went quiet online. No more group brunch photos, no more cryptic inspirational quotes about new beginnings and self-worth. It's amazing how quickly people scatter when the leader of the pack starts to sink. Then came the calls. First from Maddie, who sounded like she'd been crying for days, her voice trembling as she apologized again and again for not asking questions, for not realizing how far things had gone. She said Diane told them I was distant, moody, that I had checked out long ago, and Maddie had believed her. Liam called the next night, quieter, more stoic like me, but his silence said more than his words. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "I didn't know. I should have. I didn't hold it against them. They're young. They believed their mother because she fed them a story that fit their memories, not the truth underneath it. And besides, I never asked them to take sides. I just wanted them to know I was still here, still steady, still me." But of course, the storm had one more round left in it. It was about 10 days after the lunch meeting, a gray Saturday morning with rain tapping against the windows like a second hand on a slow clock. I was halfway through my second cup of black coffee, the kind that tastes burnt and bold at the same time, when I heard a knock on the front door. I knew who it was before I even stood up. There was a rhythm to it, hesitant, desperate, almost like an apology you're not brave enough to say out loud. I opened the door, and there she was. Diane. Hair pulled back in a messy bun that looked like it had been slept on for days, makeup smeared around her eyes like someone had tried to wipe away yesterday's tears and only made things worse. She wasn't wearing shoes, just socks soaked from the rain and a long coat over pajamas. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stared at each other, a silent tug-of-war stretching across the threshold. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. "I messed up," she said, voice breaking apart at the edges. "I messed everything up. I was stupid. I was scared. I didn't know how to say I was unhappy without blowing everything apart, and I thought if I lit the fuse fast enough, I wouldn't feel the explosion." I let her talk. I didn't nod. I didn't agree or disagree. I just listened like she was a stranger telling me a story at a bus stop, one I wasn't sure I believed, but didn't have the energy to interrupt. She kept going, rambling now, tears streaking down her cheeks, reaching out to touch my hand. I let her fingers graze mine for exactly 1 second before I stepped back, reached behind the door, and handed her the only thing I had left to give, a signed, sealed, no-nonsense divorce agreement. "I've already spoken to your new lawyer," I said flatly. "It's clean. Straightforward. Everything you already asked for. All that's left is your signature." She stared down at the papers like they were written in another language, like they were heavier than the rain soaking through her coat. "Can't we talk? Please. Just, can we try again?" I shook my head slowly, not out of anger, not even out of spite, but because there was simply nothing left to say. You can't rebuild a house from ashes, especially when the person who lit the fire still smells like smoke. She walked away eventually, papers tucked under her arm like a child who lost her favorite toy, and I closed the door behind her without a sound. Freedom tastes like strong black coffee on a Tuesday morning with no one asking where you're going, what time you'll be back, or why you're wearing boots in July. It tastes like toast made exactly how you like it, eaten in silence with the window cracked open, no pressure to be charming or fixed or anything other than still breathing. It feels like waking up in a bed where no one's judging how late you stayed up reading or why your side of the sheets is a mess. I found myself again in the quiet. Or maybe I just stopped hiding. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a small cafe across the country, sipping that same bitter coffee, watching people pass by outside like ghosts in a movie I'm no longer part of. I've got a new apartment with bare walls and ugly carpet, but it's mine, and I sleep like a man who finally stopped running. I wrote this whole story on a borrowed laptop, mostly for myself, but maybe for someone else too. Someone who thinks they're crazy for feeling the gut pull of betrayal, but can't quite name it. Someone who needs to hear that you can survive having your world yanked out from under you, and you don't need revenge in the Hollywood sense. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being okay. I'm not saying I won, but I sure as hell didn't lose. And just when I thought I was finally out of the tunnel, the past reached out one last time. My phone buzzed against the table, screen lighting up with a number I didn't recognize. No name, just a message that read, "She's coming your way. Thought you should know."